Hi, I'm an anonymous sex and love addict, and I want to share my story with you. Where did it all start? I have a series of defining moments, ones that I'm not even sure of yet. I only have a year and a half in recovery, but it's been a really great year so far, and a half. One of my major defining moments was my parents' arrest when I was about 2 years old. And that created this huge abandonment issue, which has manifested in my disease as a lot of shitty phone behavior. I was really bullied by my brother when I was little. And that's something that I've recently worked through. Some other defining moments, one thing that comes up for me is feeling really invisible. Feeling like no one sees me, no one gets me, no one understands me. I had a stepmom who also told me I was too much. I was a drama queen. My personality hurt other people. That one I specifically remember is just like looking at a picture with her and just like, I was having fun and I struck a pose and I guess my pose covered someone's face in the photo and I was just kind of shamed for that. I wasn't taught how to be aware of my body. I was taught how to be upset with myself and hate my body. Anyways, moving on from defining moments, these created like these little inner child wounds. I had a 2-year-old that was really wounded. I had like a 5 to 7-year-old that was really wounded. A 13-year-old, I was raped when I was 19 and I have that piece of me. All through my life, my mom was extremely coercive, and that's something that I'm dealing with now a little bit later in my recovery, now that I've worked through some of the major traumas. I've been listening a lot to stuff about emotional sobriety and just starting to deal with that, Anyways, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but back to my story. So what I did to cover the pain instead of deal with the pain was I started acting out. I also acted out because of really simple responsibilities. But I'll get to that later, I suppose. Yeah, so I started acting out. I had my first boyfriend when I was in preschool, and I shared him with another girl. Shared him with another little girl, and it was like 2 weeks he was my boyfriend, 2 weeks he was her boyfriend, and thus began the pursuit of emotionally unavailable people to distract me from myself. And I guess there was this investigation that happened after that. I don't really remember too much. I just remember I did sexual things with this other, 4 or 5? How old are you in preschool? And the teacher walked in on us one day, and then so I guess that stopped. I don't really remember too much after that. And I just know after that I went into a lot of fantasy. There was this boy I had a crush on in first grade, and we would throw rocks at each other across the playground, and he was, of course, a bad boy. He got suspended for stabbing some kid with a pencil. Like, of course that's the kid I'm attracted to, ugh. Anyways, turns out there was a lot of violence in my home at that time, and I couldn't remember. I still don't remember. But my older brother remembers, and he's told me a little bit about that. So I used to write myself letters, and I would write them as if it was from this little boy. And I told myself something like, I really want to marry you. I want to have sex with you and have babies with you. And it's just because I knew that sex was how you got babies. And I mailed it to myself, and then my stepmom opened it, and she shamed me for having these ideas. And I remember sitting in a room by myself crying and listening to her and my dad talk about it, and just feeling like I was so bad, I was so gross, I was so dirty. And then I started fantasizing about a new boy in my daycare. And that was a fantasy until about 6th or 7th grade, when I noticed the abundance of people I could have crushes on, and started having attraction towards women, although I've never really explored that too much. And yeah, and I remember one of my early experiences as well was this boy was following me around. He was a couple grades older than me, and his mother worked at the elementary school that I went to. And he would follow me around and tell me about all these, like, sexual things that he would want to do with me, and I wouldn't want that, and I would tell him to leave me alone, and he wouldn't leave me alone. And these other kids, like, following me around, saying, like, oh, when are you gonna marry No Name, for the sake of anonymity, like, when are you gonna marry No Name? And they'd be like, you and blank sitting in a tree, KISSING, and I'd be like, stop, like, I don't like him, I don't want that. And just like my no just being taken away from me, not being allowed to have a voice. And same thing, like, with my mom and her coerciveness. Is just like, you should do this thing. Like, do you want to do this thing? No, I don't want to do it. Well, you should do it. You should think about it. No, Mom, I really don't want to do that. And it not mattering, like, it just not mattering to her. And her just wearing me down until, like, finally, okay, I'll do it. And, that's the codependent piece of my disease. Anyways, fast forward, and I realize other people exist, and I start, like, I have my first boyfriend, and I, like, kiss people. And I remember actually, one of my first kisses after preschool, I had walked to the bus stop, and I had missed the bus because it was further than I had thought it was going to be. And they had moved the bus route around. And I was walking back home, and this guy was just outside, and I was like 13, and I don't know, this guy's 30-something. And he gets me to have a conversation with him, and then I go inside with him because I'm, like, so codependent. I can't be like, no, I really want to go home. And I go inside of his house, and he locks the door. And I remember thinking, like, that's not comfortable for me. And we end up making out because I don't know how to say no. And he picks me up and puts me over his shoulder. I'm like, I want to go now. And he's like, no, you shouldn't go. And I don't know how I escaped that situation. Like, eventually he just let me go outside, and all we did was make out, and he called me a couple times, and I didn't know how to be like, stop calling me, I don't like you. So I just did that thing where, like, I ghost them, I, like, answer the phone a little bit, and then I walk away. And I actually had an experience recently where, like, in recovery, I was able to tell someone, like, I'm not looking to exchange numbers with you. because the codependent piece of me will take your number trying not to hurt your feelings, and then I'll just, answer once, and then answer once every 3 times, and then just stop answering altogether. And I was able to avoid that whole painful situation for me and for the other person. Like, it doesn't feel good to be the person receiving that kind of treatment. Anyways, so, that happened, and that was, like, the start of my actual, like, dating. And, like, I still have a fantasy piece of me, but that's where, like, acting out in fantasy stopped and actual acting out started. Or, like, physical acting out. I shouldn't say actual acting out. It's all acting out. So, I was in therapy this whole time, like, in and out of therapy. I used to cut myself. I started therapy when the teacher walked in on me and that little boy. And, been in and out my whole life. And I'm back in it. It's much more useful now that I'm in recovery, I must say. Anyway, so, what was I saying? My physical acting out started, and I started putting myself in more and more dangerous situations. And that's how I got raped when I was 19, because I just couldn't handle being alone, and being with a guy was more important than being with my friends. So I let this person that I didn't even know, never met, come pick me up and take me over to a house that he was house sitting at. And, like, anyway, so I started, as serial monogamous, getting into relationships, and each one was worse and worse and worse and progressively more abusive. And I ended up in a relationship with someone with borderline personality disorder, and I put $3,000 down on a car for this person. I've never driven the car. I think maybe once while we were still together, I drove the car. And this person would call me names. They were just like flip of the switch, and they were such an abuser. And even when I was going to help them get the car, and I was asking them questions, and they were like, just started calling me names. Can't even remember what they said. They just started calling me names, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to help you. I can't handle this relationship anymore. And then they just spouted off again. They started hitting the steering wheel. They were driving the car, by the way. They started hitting the steering wheel and throwing their phone around the car, and like grabbing me. And I remember one time being afraid that they were gonna like hit my head into the car windshield. And, I was actually kind of trying to commit suicide by being in an abusive relationship. That was one of the thoughts that I had at one point, was like, I know how I'll commit suicide. I don't have the guts to kill myself. I'll just commit suicide through an abusive relationship. So I helped this person get a car, even though they're like yelling at me. I almost drove away. They told me, they got out of the car, they said, don't leave, don't move, I'll be right back. We're at the car dealership at this point, and I got into the driver's seat because I was in the passenger seat, and I started the car, and I backed up, and I was gonna leave, and like my addiction just kept me there somehow. And if I had left, I think I would have been in that relationship longer, because it was helping them get that car and realizing, like, this is the life I'm investing in. Is this really what I want for myself? 2 weeks later, I ended up leaving the person. And I still have resentment about that. And I'm trying to work through that. And anyways, I think that's how I ended up having the strength to leave that person. Because I don't think I would have left them if I had not bought the car. It had to become more real for me. Anyway, so I broke up with that person, and they still lived at my house. They had their own room at my house, and they lived there for a little while. They didn't want to leave, and I was like kind of fooling around with an ex and dating 3 other people. I'd only gone on first dates, and the person who was willing to enmesh with me was the next person I got into a relationship with 2 weeks later. Um, they were the person who was willing to, like, tell me how much they adored me and how wonderful I was, and how they would give up anything to be with me, and how they only had eyes for me, and that begun my bottom. My worst relationship only lasted 5 months, broke up every, 2 days, I swear, and they had, PTSD from military stuff, and not only that, but, dating someone in the military is kind of against my value. Not kind of, it's, against my values. The military has a lot of values that I'm not okay with, and so military just, shouldn't be my thing, and it was. I dated this person knowing that they weren't the right person for me. I was so aware of it. I remember I met them on the bus, and I was having a conversation with them about rape culture, and they, right over their head. They weren't getting it. They weren't agreeing. And I knew, oh, this person's not on my level. But I was in a class where someone was talking about how men are, more willing to accept someone who's, not as smart as them. I was like, well, if they treat me well, maybe it's okay that they're not stimulating intellectually for me. And, that was so wrong. Oh, so wrong. And this person ended up later telling me that they would never forgive me if I got raped while we were in a relationship, because I was probably a victim of circumstance and I could have avoided the situation. So, I don't shave. I'm very, anyways, this person needed someone who would shave, and that was just one of the many little ways. And I remember we got in a fight one time. Also, I've never really fought with my exes, anyways, so we got in a fight, and they were talking about rape culture, and I was like, I don't think that you and I are compatible, at all. And they were like, are you really going to let something like this get in the way of us? This is a pretty fundamental thing for me. Anyways, I was in that relationship for 5 months, and this person totaled my car. And I still stayed in a relationship with them. I think they were on drugs. And then I made a commitment to my therapist. I'm going to be celibate for 6 months. I'm going to do it. I finally admitted I had a problem. I looked into Codependence Anonymous and started going to open AA meetings. But I didn't feel like I had my place there. And I felt at home because I grew up in AA. My mom was sober after their arrest. My mom went to rehab and got sober. And, yeah, I couldn't find my niche, and I told my therapist, 6 months, I'm going to do it, 6 months celibate, and 2 weeks later I was in another relationship. Haha, surprise. And I couldn't stop snooping, and I knew I had a problem, and Codependence Anonymous was not hitting my spot, was not filling me the way that I needed to, was not showing me how to fill my God-sized hole. And my therapist was like, well, there's this other program, and they set bottom lines, and it's a little more strict from what I hear. And I was like, what is it? What is it? She told me, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. You can buy the book online. And so I looked it up. I bought the book. I had the book. Started, me and that person that I was dating broke up. I read the book. We got back together a week later. Finally got a sponsor. Started working the steps. We broke up again. We were both engaging in pretty shitty behavior. I just couldn't stop snooping, and this person was, doing their own thing. I'm acting out in their own disease that, I'll let them figure that out. So, we broke up again. He said some really abusive things one night when he was really drunk, and we broke up the next morning because I just couldn't, and, I started really, work through step 2, work through step 3, and then that person came back into my work, and I was just powerless. I ended up talking to them again, back in a relationship, and, And my sponsor told me to call her when I was ready to be sober, and it felt really harsh, and I felt like I was kicked out of program, so I left. I left for 2 months. And who knows, maybe if she had let me stay in program, it would have been enabling, and I would have been in a painful relationship for even longer. I don't know how God works. It's mysterious, but I have faith that my higher power was present in that time in my life. And went back out, but I just couldn't shake it anymore. I would meditate. Every time I would meditate and pray, I would just be sobbing. I would be sobbing, and I'd be praying for God's will. And, every time, like, things would start to get rocky when I would pray for God's will to be done and for my happiness and his happiness above all else, even if that meant us not getting together and being together, and things would get rocky in the relationship. And so that continued for 2 months. And then finally one night, another thing, drunk again. I blocked him from leaving. He was saying really hurtful things, and he wanted to just walk away, and I blocked him from leaving. And I'm like, who am I turning into? Like, this is not me. Like, I don't hold people hostage. Who am I right now? And I broke up with him that night, and I really didn't want to. And I told him I didn't want to. And he was, so in ego and pride that he was like, fuck you, and he walked away. And thank God. Thank God. It was so painful, but thank God he walked away, because if he had told me to stop and held me, like the person with borderline personality did all the time, whenever I tried to break up with them, they would hold me, and they would like hold me hostage physically until I broke down crying, and then I would forgive them. And if this person had done that, like, I wouldn't have been able to break up with them. I am powerless over this disease. And anyway, so, I went camping for a week and had no contact with this person. And I started working the program again. Got a new sponsor, and I started working the program. And I've worked all the steps now. But then, inevitably you start, not inevitably, because there's the anorexia piece of this disease, which I feel like I'm starting to understand in my life, because my acting out was so overt and so obvious that I didn't see in what ways I was avoiding myself and avoiding intimacy and being anorexic in the program. And so, anyways, I started working the program again, and I kept my bottom lines from before, and bottom lines are behaviors that you do not engage in because they'll lead you to insanity. Bottom lines are equivalent to an alcoholic taking a drink. So, like, bottom line that I still have today is no snooping. And that includes, like, cyber stalking. It could be cyber stalking friends. It's like no snooping. I do not snoop. No engaging in fantasy once I realize I'm having fantasy. And I'm not dating right now. I just ended something a little bit ago. And but if I were dating, it would be no cheating. And no cheating includes a lot of things for me. But there's normally more stuff when you first come in program. And it's based on any individual person. So it's different bottom lines. So, I have a sponsee who one of her bottom lines is, I only ask once, and I follow up when I say I'm going to follow up. So, it's a totally different bottom line from the ones that I have. So it's based on how you act out. And, so, anyways, I set the bottom lines, I worked the program, I started seeing gifts in my life, a lot with work. A lot of the work environments I was attracted to really changed. I started getting meaningful, deep friendships. A lot of my friendships had been with avoidant people before, and I never really realized that. And then I started dating. I got cleared for dating, and I started dating. And I started making my amends, and I ended acting out with that same ex again. And And this time I had a sponsor who said, why don't you take some time to think about whether or not you want to date them? If you decide you want to sober date them, okay. Because in the end, it's our own path to recovery, and no one else can say what God's will is. I have suggestions for my sponsees and suggestions I really think they should follow. That doesn't mean that I know what God's will is or that I am speaking God's voice. Everyone has their own path, and who knows? Anyway, so my sponsor, told me, take some time, think about it. And I was like, yeah, I was thinking I should do 3 days no contact. It's a tool of our program to create space and really sit with what's going on with us instead of just reacting and reacting and reacting. So I took 3 days, which turned into a week, and I decided not to date that person, and I kept dating other people. And I got into a relationship. It was kind of accelerated. Wasn't following my dating plan perfectly at all. We got together after 4 dates, which is actually an improvement because normally it's after 2 dates, you're my boyfriend and you live with me. So anyways, this person did not live with me, and I noticed my avoidant for the first time because I wasn't engaging in my enmeshing behaviors and my super addicty behaviors. I started noticing how I try to run away a lot. And it was really uncomfortable, and I was really obsessed with this person's behavior around the phone, which has always been a big trigger for me. Phone stuff is a big trigger for me, and it's because I feel abandoned. If you're not in constant contact with me, if you're not with me at every single moment, I think you don't exist. And I was able to work through that experience, through that trauma by dating. I dated this person for 6 months, we were in a relationship for 6 months. And I started to learn for the first time ever what it means to be responsible for my own emotions, because I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how to be responsible for myself, right? Because you had to contact me at every single moment so that I felt okay. So you were responsible for me. And for the first time ever, I finally, at the end of the relationship, I did 30 days no initiating contact. So I just took whatever they gave me to see, to try to break my obsession with their behavior around the phone. And what I found was we ended up not talking for 4 days, which doesn't work for me, I've come to realize. But only through this process and working through my abandonment issue could I come to realize that 4 days of no contact just doesn't work for me. It's not how I feel connected in a relationship, and that's okay. Anyways, so I did this 30 days no contact thing, and I was trying to do inner child work and meditate and pray and really turn my will over to God and just be okay. And I ended up reading this book called The 4 Agreements. This is not a SLAW endorsed book. This is just a book that I read on my path to recovery. Actually, I read it a long time ago, and I reread it. I started rereading it, and I probably only got 5 pages in, but I read what I needed to read, which was, if there is something in you that's hurting, it's not because of something that someone else is doing. It's because you have an old wound and you're deciding to take it personally. Whatever they're doing, you are taking it personally, and you're putting the responsibility onto them, and instead you need to be looking at that old wound and why it's hurting you. It has nothing to do with this other person. Nothing at all. And I realized, my old wound is this abandonment when my parents were arrested and disappeared from my life for 1.5 years, 2 years. Because one was in jail and one was in rehab, and then in sober living. And then they had to work with a social worker to prove that they had an environment in which they could bring me back. And my brothers, I had 3 brothers. Well, I had 2 at the time. 3rd one came later. So anyways, it was that abandonment, that really core abandonment, was being triggered by this person not contacting me. And I finally worked to a place where I was okay. I was okay not hearing from this person. My world wasn't going to end. I was fine. I had my stuff together. I started building a really full life. And it's the first time I ever went into a relationship with some semblance of a life and walking out with an even bigger one. Because in the past I walked in with some semblance of a life, and then it fell apart. And then for 2 weeks I would gain some semblance of a life again. And then I would just abandon it for a person. And this is the first time, like, I signed up for scuba diving lessons. I'm now scuba certified, although I don't do very much with it. And that's a whole other program that I need to work that has to do with money. Anyways, I got scuba certified. I signed up for swing class, which was really fun. I want to do it again, but I decided to do something else this next 6 months. Anyways, so I just sat with that. I sat with that abandonment of that 2-year-old, and I said, like, what do you need? Like, baby girl, I am here, and what do you need? And I held myself, and I meditated on that inner child. And, I realized, like, I want to be in a relationship with someone who cares to connect with me every day and, like, build a real relationship. And I said, girl, do you tell yourself that you love you every day and connect with yourself every single day? Like, yeah, I journal. I meditate. But no, I don't say I love you every day. And I said, okay, I could do an affirmation. And I said, you know what? I really like writing letters. And I've written a lot of letters to a lot of loved ones over the years, friends and dating people. And I decided I can write myself a love letter. Like, I can do that for me. And so I have. I've been doing it every day for 8 months now. I may have missed 1 or 2 days, and that's okay. I can just pick it back up where I left off, That's another thing. In the past, I would have abandoned a project if I didn't do it perfectly. So, I just, like, it's okay. And 8 months, it's the longest time I've ever kept any commitment, besides showing up at meetings now. And, that's really cool. And it's been a lot of growth. And then, so that happened. That, like, by dating, I was able to work through that trauma. And then I was also able to be like, this relationship doesn't work for me. It's not reciprocal enough. And I was able to walk away. And, I took a little break from dating. And then I started dating again. And again, I dated someone who triggered the coercion of my mom. This is why it's something I'm dealing with now. They triggered that little piece of me that feels so invisible, that, like, when I feel invisible, I want to build a wall. I build this wall, and then I want you to come and break it down, because it's your responsibility, right? It's not my responsibility. It's your responsibility. At least that's how I used to feel and used to think. And, so, I lost myself for a moment there. And yeah, dating this person, by taking a pause and taking a space, I was only going on 1 date a week with this person. And in that space, I got to really work through all the stuff that I would have kept trying to cover up by acting out and acting out and acting out. So I worked through this thing where, I remember when I was about 13 and I'm camping with my family and I'm feeling really left out. So what I do when I feel left out, when I feel invisible, I try to make myself invisible. So, like, I have the power by being invisible and you don't have the power by making me feel invisible. I removed myself and I went and I hid. And I sat on this rock in this really tall grass. And I hid where I could see them and hear them, but they couldn't really see or hear me. And I just waited. I waited for someone to notice that I was gone. And no one noticed that I was gone. And that was painful. It was really painful. And I, made myself cry. And then I went back and my dad was like, hey, glad to see you back. They had noticed, but, I don't remember that or I remember it, but I don't hold on to that piece where my dad like was grateful to see me again. I hold on to the piece where like no one saw me. And this is a pattern of mine. It's reoccurring. I do it all the time. And I was able to work through that with this person where I retreat. And instead of retreating, I let myself be seen. And I recognized it. And instead of judging myself and saying like, oh, I'm a drama queen and like no one wants to hear it, you know, like all those lies I was told by my stepmom, like I reached out to fellows. And then same thing with this other thing happened recently that allowed me to work through my brother bullying me. Like I also have a lot of shame, or I used to have a lot of shame in calling these things traumas, but they're little traumas. They make my body react in a traumatic way. You know, I feel like tingling all over my body, and I feel a flush of heat, and I just trauma symptoms. And anyways, so, you know, this thing happened, and this is how I've started coming to understand the anorexia a little bit more and how it manifests in my life. Where I started isolating from my fellows, and I felt really left out and out of place, and, you know, I was doing that thing where, like, I feel invisible, I feel like I don't belong, I feel like I don't fit in, so I leave the situation. And what I used to do in my past was totally enmesh with this other person. You know, I don't need to be accepted by anyone else because I have this one person who, like, has to love me and accept me, you know, they were my hostage, and I used them. But I didn't have that because I had just stopped dating this person. They weren't working for me. They weren't available enough. So I stopped dating them, so I didn't have that. And then I was like isolating from fellows, and I had to just sit with what is going on with me? You know, I did the whole thing again, like, what is it? What is my wound that's being touched? Like, what's going on? And it was like these little moments where, like, being really bullied by my brother came up for me when I was processing through the whole dating thing that I went through with the last person that I dated. And I was like, how do I take care of that little girl? And then over here on the other side, there was, you know, isolation and program and all these little events that made me feel unwelcomed, unwanted. A sponsee left me. A fellow was going through withdrawal and reacted really harshly to something I said, and I don't remember, something else happened, like another fellow didn't call me back but was responding in this group thread, and like, just like, you know, stuff, and I felt unwelcomed. And then over on the left, you know, I had remembered being really bullied by my brother and being like so bullied by him, and crying and begging him to just leave me alone, like, please leave me alone. And I would physically lash out at him because I had no other means. I didn't know what else to do. And then he would just get me in a headlock and keep bullying me, and I would feel so powerless, and like there was nothing that I could do. And then it clicked. And then I got it. Like, sitting with that and doing, like, a minute of journaling. Because I journal almost every day now. Not always every day, but I journal a lot, so things tend to come quicker now. My brother told me, no one wants you. You're cheap. We want to, one of the things he told me, we got you at the 99-cent store, and we would have returned you if we could have. But we lost the receipt, you know, and being told that over and over again, and you're too much, and you're a drama queen, and blah, blah, blah. No one wants you. You have no value. You know, no wonder I think that I don't belong anywhere, that I feel like I don't fit in sometimes. And that I have shame about reaching out about it. It was my first time ever. I finally called like 3 fellows, and I'm spinning out, and I finally call some fellows, and they answer the call, and they're like, okay, I hear you. Sounds like you're really in your head. Like, what's going on? And I just got to say, like, I have so much shame about reaching out to you about this because I'm telling myself that I'm just being dramatic. And they got me, and they understood me, and they like held a safe space for me. And I got to work through that trauma, and I feel like I really healed that little girl, you know? My 2-year-old, my 13-year-old, they're doing pretty good, you know? And I feel like I made this joke. I feel like I'm reaching age-appropriate emotional maturity. Because it was like I was operating at 2-year-old level, and then I was operating at like 13-year-old level. And slowly but surely, I hope to reach my actual age. Anyway, so right now I feel like I'm operating, I don't know. Doesn't matter. So anyways, these are some of the tools that I've used to help heal myself. And, you know, there's this thing online, the 40 tools. I used to carry those around in my pocket for a little while. And I've used the tools of withdrawal too. Like whenever I feel like I'm going through a really difficult time, I take these little notebooks and around with me, and I just fill them up with how I'm feeling step by step, you know, because in those moments, you know, if a fellow hadn't answered the phone, it would have just been me and God. And I got to learn how to rely on me and God. So what do I want to say about that? Let me just take a moment to collect myself. So today, what sobriety looks like for me is really learning how to be there for myself. Like I told you, these love letters. I also started writing letters to God every morning, to my higher power. I name it something different every day. I imagine my higher power to be this kind of androgynous mermaid. But that also changes. I personally don't feel a need to define my higher power, because I think my higher power is kind of, you know, something that is beyond my comprehension, but also something that I just have faith in. And I'm learning how to have more faith. And, you know, walking through situations. Okay, so in the last dating situation I had, in the first one too, but especially in the last one, and even now just in life with my roommates, with my coworkers, with my clients, with my fellows in program, with my sponsor, with my sponsees, I'm learning how to be really direct and vulnerable. And I never knew that direct communication was vulnerable communication. Like calling my sponsor, I just got a new sponsor. And I had to call my old sponsor and tell her, like, hey, you know, I really appreciate how much you've been there for me, but I'm looking to work through the steps again, and I'm looking to work through them differently. And I'm going to look for someone new to work through them with. That is more vulnerable than disappearing. You know, that is direct communication, and that is vulnerable. I was able to tell the last person that I dated, like, hey, I noticed we have really different ways of scheduling out our weekends, and I like spending time with you, so I'd like to talk about a compromise for the way that we schedule our weekends. Can we talk about that? That is fucking vulnerable. You know, instead of trying to manipulate them into seeing things my way or changing them, or like, can we talk about a compromise? And they have a chance to tell me, no, that's not going to work for me. Or, yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Like, it's so uncomfortable. And it's always uncomfortable. I have not seen it get less uncomfortable. But it gets easier. And I have more faith walking through these things, you know, and that's what my program looks like today. You know, it doesn't, I heard someone at a meeting the other night say, it doesn't get better, it gets different. And I really liked that, because life doesn't necessarily get better. I get better at handling life. I get better at dealing with it. You know, right now, the little things that make me, you know, I'm not dating, and at this moment, because I'm reworking the steps and I'm waiting for my sponsor to clear me. Not waiting for, I don't really care about dating right now, but which is like, what? I don't care about dating right now. It's kind of crazy. And anyway, where was I going with this? I've been making these little to-do lists. I'm applying to grad school. I am applying to the H&I committee. I'm like doing all these little things. And I'm seeing how it's these things that are the reason I used to act out. Like, I get overwhelmed opening up an application. No wonder I used to go act out. Like, no wonder I used to find someone to enmesh with. No wonder I would just, all the little things that I would do. No wonder I would go and snoop on my significant other's phone so that I didn't have to look at, like, how I need to finish that big assignment that I have no idea how to even start. And it's all these little things that I used to go act out over. I opened up this application, the H&I committee application to, I really want to do it, but it's really overwhelming for me and really intimidating. And I opened it up to look at it, and just like even the thought of it, I felt like I was falling apart. And like I used to use people to hold me together. Like, it's your responsibility to hold me together, and today I don't do that. Today I like sit with God, sit with my higher power. And I'm getting to look really clearly at how I've avoided myself my whole life. Really clearly at it. And it feels so much better to be there for myself than it does to avoid myself. It feels so much better. But it doesn't necessarily feel comfortable. It's like I'm experiencing the discomfort, and instead of avoiding the discomfort and like having it grow and grow and grow and take me down, I experience the discomfort, I walk through it, I deal with it, I have the uncomfortable conversation, or I, just breathe through filling out the application, or I communicate the boundary that I have, and it's uncomfortable, and then it's done. And then I feel better, and I feel taken care of by my higher power, and I feel okay. And so I'm just learning how to have more faith right now. And it's really interesting, I talked about emotional sobriety earlier, and I want to talk about it again really quick. I've been listening to stuff about emotional sobriety, and it's been really eye-opening for me. It's like what I'm left with when I take away the acting out is this unemotionally sober person, and I'm learning how to be emotionally sober. And it means not seeking validation from other people, including my work, including my program. Like, I can't be like, oh, I give such good advice. Like, that's a thing that I'm really invested in my advice, and it causes me pain. I can't rely on other people, ideas, the thing that I was listening to about emotional sobriety talks about how in AA, Bill W. was, getting a lot of his self-worth from outside institutions. He was getting a lot of his worth from AA, and like, that's not being emotionally sober. And you can go out after a long time for that kind of stuff. And so anyways, I'm just learning how to do that. And something else that just popped into my head right now is, I felt really sloppy. I am really sloppy. My sobriety is not perfect, and it's really sloppy. And I had an old timer tell me that for the first 5 years, she would consider someone a newcomer for the first 5 years. And that gave me a lot of hope because I'm still learning, I thought all these little things would just go away when I got sober, all these little things that kept me feeling down, or like, but sobriety is not about feeling good all the time. It's about feeling good about the way I handle my life. And I'm really starting to feel good about the way that I'm handling my life. I feel like there's this promise. I don't know which step literature it comes from, which 12-step program, but situations that, like, we learn to handle intuitively, situations that used to baffle us. And I feel like that's really coming true in my life. And one of the promises of this program that I truly feel in my life is we learn to handle our own needs before involving ourselves with others. And that's such a beautiful gift. And I never knew that that would be a beautiful gift. You know, I always thought, like, no, I have to get the thing and then I'll be okay. And then I'll be able to take care of myself. Turns out I was wrong, and that's okay. Also, I just want to put out there top lines. That is how I have learned how to take care of my own needs before involving myself with other people. Just top lines. From saying I love you to making outreach calls to signing up for that swing dance class. You know, there's this whole array. A top line could be brushing your teeth, which is very important. You know, all the little ways to take care of yourself, to like resting when I'm sick. To camping. One of my goals, one of my top lines right now is going out in nature once a month. And it's essential to my well-being, you know. So thank you so much for listening. And I hope that this helped you somehow. And thank you.